G'day and welcome to another gun repair video on my channel. Now a little while ago I was actually repairing or replacing the battery in it was actually my wife's waterproof watch. And the way you do that with watches with screw-on backs is they have little notches, and you have a special tool, which I've got. You have a special thing to hold the watch and a special tool, and you unscrew, goes into the little notches in the case, in the screw-on back case of the watch, and you unscrew it in order to get into it to replace the battery. But when I went to unscrew the back of the watch, it was just the little tool just kept slipping off. It was just on so tight that it was impossible to unscrew with a special little wrench. So I thought, oh, what do I do about this? So I, of course, do as you do. I went to the internet and had a look. I found a common fix for that was you get a nut, you know, like a nut and bolt type nut, as large as will sit on the back of the watch case, and you clean the watch case and the nut with acetone, and then using some super glue or cyanoacrylate glue, you glue the nut onto the back of the watch case, and you leave that to cure. And theoretically, if you leave it overnight, it will, you know, get to its maximum strength, and then you just use a wrench and undo the nut and you can unscrew it. And so I thought, oh well, that's worth a go. Of course, being a gun guy, anytime I do something like that, I always think, can I use this method in any sort of gun repair? And my first thought was, I wonder if you could use it to get a broken case out of the chamber of a rifle. Now this was about 18 months ago. And then finally, on the weekend, I had something where I can actually try it out. So this is a 22 Hornet, Ruger 7722 in 22 Hornet, and it has a broken case in the chamber. Now there's a variety of ways of getting broken cases out of the chamber of a centerfire rifle. In most cases, you know, if you're at the range or hunting or whatever and you get a broken case, simply using a cleaning rod with either a very tight patch or possibly a bronze brush, carefully pushing it down from the muzzle will, if the case is not too tight in the chamber, it'll catch the case and it'll push it out. And I reckon, you know, in at least 50% of cases that will be successful. Now the most common type of broken case is a case head separation, and that's where just in front of the rear of the case, where the thinner wall of the case becomes thick, what's called the web of the case, especially in multiple reloaded cases, during repeated firings, the brass just gets thinner and thinner there, and then eventually, you know, unbeknown to the reloader or the shooter, it still looks the same on the outside. The pressure's too much and it just gives way during firing, and then when you go to extract it, it just pulls the back of the case. So you basically just have the rim and only about, you know, 8 mils or something in front of the rim left behind, and the rest of the case is in the chamber. Now, that can happen in any cartridge, and it can even happen in new cartridges. In my reading, I've found cases, especially with cheaper military ammo in the US, that Tula Russian ammo seems to be have a bit of a problem with this. Even in new cases it can happen, but you get a case head separation and the rest of the case is left in the chamber. The incidence of this you'll probably see most if you spend a lot of time at ranges and do a lot of shooting is with a 303 British in a Lee Enfield action. Because it's a relocking action, the theory is every time it fires, the bolt is compressed that tiny little bit. So the actual case head, the case grips the chamber and the case head's allowed to just move slightly, and so the theory is that type of action and the design of the 303 case is such that it gets thinner and thinner, and I have seen, I've got a 303 and I have had many years ago when I first got it, I had a case head separation. Now there are actual tools for removing broken cases from rifles. in military rifles, either the armour or often in a machine gun kit, in amongst the tools for a machine gun kit, there'll be a broken case extractor. I'll show you what one of those looks like now. I've got a 303 one of those. This type of broken shell extractor works by basically you just put it into the chamber like a cartridge, and it's made of two parts, as you can see. There's the main body, and then there's this part here which is made of hardened spring steel and with a split in it. So as you can see, it's kind of got a little bit of springiness to it. So as you shove it into the case, this part here with the it's not actually a thread, it's just a little raised ribs, goes into the neck of the case. And then as the extractor grabs the rim and you start to pull it out, you can see that there's a taper just there, and that taper spreads the little spring steel ribs into the inside of the neck and grips it, and it just pulls it out. And these are very effective. Obviously in wartime, in the heat of battle, if you had a broken case in your Bren gun or other machine gun, you needed to be able to sort it out quickly. So the gunners always had one of these handy, and they could just quickly shove it into the chamber and pull the broken case out and then continue shooting. If you've got a 303, I think it's well worth trying to get yourself one of these Bren gun ones. Now, with these broken case extractors, they're mainly only available for military calibers. Or military cartridges. And they're either actual military ones, ex-military ones, or there are some commercial ones that have been made over the years, which in a lot of cases were just copies of the military ones. There was a company in the US called CJ Armory, I think. Brownells do actually have one type of case extractor, broken case extractor, for 5.56 and 7.62 by 51 only, so only those two military calibers. Now, the other type of case separation you'll see seems to be more common in the older, thin-walled cartridge case designs that were originally black powder cartridges. So 4440, 3220, and as we found in this, 22 Hornet. Because of course the 22 Hornet, the actual case design was originally a black powder design. It was actually the 22 Winchester centerfire way back in the day, back in the 1880s, I think. And then it was only in the I think the 1920s maybe, when I think it was Winchester again, used the old case and loaded it with smokeless powder at much higher velocities and called it the 22 Hornet. So these cases tend to be very thin-walled and have fairly gentle, shoulders. They go up and they have a slope and then a very gentle shoulder. And for some reason they seem to break just behind the shoulder. I haven't had this in any of my other, because I got 4440, 3220 and Hornet. I haven't had it break before, but I have seen reference on the net of especially 3220s breaking, and 22 Hornets as well actually. So if your rod and brush and all that, like I discussed, doesn't work, you need to take your rifle home really and work out how you're going to get it out, and assuming that there's no case extractor tool available for it. And you might not want, even if you've got a military caliber, you may not want to go out and find and buy a broken case extractor tool, because there are other methods of getting it out, as you'll see. There's a variety of methods of getting them out. You'll see, on YouTube and on the net. Some have involved using some sort of steel tool to screw into the case, like a tap or something, to screw into the case and then somehow pull it out. Or the other way is using a rat tail file of the appropriate size, so it's a round, coarse file that tapers slightly, and if you get the right size, you can get it to go into the case and then turn it a bit and it'll lock into the brass, and then you can pull it out. Or put a rod down and tap it out. And those, in some cases, those methods may work, but you've got to be very careful, because you've got a hardened steel tool you're using in the chamber of your rifle, and the last thing you want to do is scratch or damage the chamber of your rifle. So, in my opinion, if you can avoid doing that sort of thing, it's probably a good thing. You want to do things where, if it doesn't go so well and it's not working, at least it's not causing any damage or making things any worse. Another method I've seen on the net, which can be seen to be quite a good method in some cases, is to use an epoxy putty. So this is a two-part putty that comes in a sort of a sausage from the hardware shop. I've got some here. It's actually called Kneadit, Kneadit. I use it for work actually, but you basically mix the two parts together, and it's just like a thick putty sort of stuff, so you can make balls of it. And what they seem to do is, there was a good one on the net where you get an earplug, a rubbery squishy earplug, shove that into the case so it's kind of hard up into the neck, and then you just get balls of this, make this kneaded up, and then very quickly before it hardens, you shove it into the case and push it up against the back of the squishy earplug and fill the case up, and it will adhere to the inside of the case, and then after half an hour it'll be completely solid, and you can then put a rod down the bore and knock the case out. So as long as you're not going to get that stuff on the chamber, it's not going to cause any problems, because in some cases, in the ones they were doing on YouTube, it was actually in an AR rifle, and where it broke off, it was basically, you could see the back of the chamber with the locking recesses. Of course the AR has multiple locking recesses, so it's sort of quite big, and then the case was almost broken off pretty much level with the back of the chamber, so there was no risk of really getting this stuff anywhere else. You could just kind of put balls of it into the back of the case and shove it in. So that may work with a case head separation, like even in the Lee Enfield, because the Lee Enfield you can kind of get to the back of the chamber reasonably easy. Whereas a lot of other rifles, of course, the chamber is kind of right down inside a recess, and you've got to be careful that you're not getting any of this stuff into your locking recesses or anything. Again, you've got to look at your individual rifle and see whether it's an appropriate method, but that's one method that's worth considering. Now the other method, which is widely known, is using Serosafe. Now if you're not familiar with Serosafe, it's actually an alloy of bismuth and some other weird metals. So it just looks like lead, and it's kind of heavy like lead. It comes in an ingot. You get it from Brownells, but it actually melts at a lower temperature than boiling water. I think water boils, of course, at about 100 degrees Celsius. I think this stuff melts at about 80 degrees Celsius or something. So what it means is you can actually just put it in something and just heat it up gently with a torch and melt it, or you can sit it in a container of boiling water and it will melt. And what it's generally used for is doing chamber castings. If you get a rifle or a firearm that you don't know what chambering it is, you can actually pour it into the chamber, knock it out, and you'll get a shaped thing that you can measure, and you can get an exact measurement of the chamber and know what it is. But another use for it, and it's actually a recommended use, is removing stuck cases. So basically what you do is you just there's actually a good video on the Midway USA with Larry. So I'll put a link down in the description if you like of this. Actually, I'll put a link of the squishy earplug one as well, using the epoxy putty. I'll put links down there, so all this stuff you've been talking about, if you want to watch them, you just go down and find them in the description. But basically with the Serosafe, you just shove a bit of a lump of cleaning cloth or whatever down beyond the chamber in front of where the mouth of the case would be. And then you just basically, and you don't have to be as careful when you're doing a chamber cast. Generally you take it out of the stock and you heat the rifle up so that when it goes in, it doesn't harden too quickly. It goes into all the recesses and you get accurate measurements. When you're doing this, you probably don't need to do that, so you probably don't even need to take it out of the stock. You could probably just sit the rifle on its muzzle and pour it into the chamber. So yeah, you basically block up the bore just in front of the chamber with a cleaning patch or something, and then you just pour your Serosafe in so it goes just to the top of the chamber. Make sure it doesn't go into the locking lugs or anything where you're not going to have trouble getting it out. The beauty of Serosafe is if you have any issues and you can't get it out, you can also just heat the rifle up with a torch and it'll all run out again. So there's no risk of it damaging anything. And then once you've got your your chamber cast hardened in the chamber, you can just put a cleaning rod or a rod down the bore carefully and just tap it out, and it'll come out as like a lead casting of the chamber, and the actual piece of brass case will be embedded in it. And in a case like this where it's actually really the broken piece is actually right in the front of the chamber, you don't probably need to fill the chamber up. Just, you can probably look down and just put a bit in so that it just goes past the neck and the shoulder, and then that would be it. Because the less you put in, the easier it'll be to tap out. So that's my backup. I'm going to try this super glue method, and if that doesn't work, well, I've got Serosafe, so I can always do a Serosafe cast, and that almost definitely will work. So the main thing with the super glue method is I don't, cause any problems. So yeah, so that's a bit of a roundup of the various methods that you can use to get a broken piece of cartridge case out of the chamber. So I've been thinking a lot about this using the super glue method, and basically if we can somehow get a shell, maybe an empty shell in, so that it's actually, with super glue you need two surfaces that are reasonably flat together, and the bigger the surface area, obviously the stronger it's going to be. So instead of being flat, it's going to be a round surface. But if we can get like push an empty cartridge case into the broken cartridge case, so that we've got a contact surface, well, a little bit of super glue on there should be enough to bond the two together, and then we should be able to easily pull it out, I think. So the main thing I've got to do is I've just got to be really careful about not gluing the case in the chamber. So we'll have to take measures to make sure that the glue is not going to be able to stick, and B, we'll be very careful how and how much of glue we'll use. So anyway, let's get into it and see how we go. So before we go any further, let's just have a look at the broken case. So this is the bit that came out of the rifle, and if we just put that there, you'll see that it's basically broken just where the shoulder starts, and obviously that's the spot where the brass is flowing up the neck when it's fired, and getting thin and breaking off there. So we've got just the funnel of the shoulder, and then the neck is left in the chamber. Here's a 22 Hornet case. What I've done with this case is I've actually put it through a 22 Hornet die with the decapping rod taken out, so it's squashed the case down, squashed the case neck down, but hasn't expanded the case, so it's as small as I can kind of make it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can initially put some case lube on there and see if I can shove this as far as I can up into the case. If I can get this down to a small enough size, I can then try putting some super glue on the neck and then shoving that back up into the broken case, hopefully gluing in place and being able to pull it out. Alright, so what I did was I put some case lube on this case, and I put it into the chamber, and I tapped that bolt just marginally with a brass hammer, tapped it forward and then tapped it back, and I think you can actually see how far that went into the piece of broken case. You can actually see most of the neck to about here has obviously gone inside. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean this case with some acetone. I'm going to clean the chamber and the piece of case that's in there. Everything apart from the neck I'll coat with Brownell's Acroglass releasing compound, so the super glue shouldn't stick to it then, so we've got no chance of the glue sticking, like the case sticking in the chamber or something similar. So I'm just going to give this case a good clean with some acetone. If I can get the lid off. Right, press here. Cold-proof lid. I'll get a bore swab and I'll actually swab the inside of the case with copious acetone, and then put a dry one through, and basically what we want is two nice clean surfaces for this super glue or cyanoacrylate to stick. Alright, so we'll do the shoulder and we'll leave the neck. Now notice I'm handling the neck with my fingers. What I'll do before I start is I'll give it another final clean with acetone. Let's put it all over this. So I'm going to be very careful and sparing with the super glue. Alright, so I gave the neck of the case another clean. I put the case in the chamber and then used the bolt to just clip the extractor over it. And then I've just pulled it back far enough so it hasn't hit the ejector, but I can see the neck of the case. So now I'm going to just very sparingly put a tiny bit of super glue on the neck of the case. Actually, I might get some light on the subject because it's a bit dark in there. Alright, put a little bit on there. Might give it a second and just see if it'll run down the bottom a little bit. And now, there's the problem. I just need to support it as it goes into the chamber so it doesn't hit the bottom of the chamber. So, here we go. Okay. All right. So theoretically, that is stuck into the case with cyanoacrylate. Fixes within 10 minutes, I think it was. So basically things are stuck together within, you know, it was only a few minutes usually, but 10 minutes, but then it takes 8 to 12 hours for full curing and full strength. All right, so here we are back again. It's 24-ish hours later. So I was going to do it this morning, we just ran out of time. So let's cross our fingers and see what happens. Oh, that doesn't feel good. Oh, yes it does. Look at that. Can we see that? We've got the broken piece of case glued to the front of that other case, and it's just pulled it out. Now it's interesting there, we've got a little bit of that super glue just make sure you can see that, a little bit of super glue's come out the back there, so it was obviously displaced just by squashing it all up. So it's probably lucky that we had the non-stick stuff on there. But anyway, that, as you saw that, I actually didn't think, I thought it would have just come adrift because the bolt just opened straight away. But it's obviously because, unlike before when it was jammed in here and I was having to pull it out from in there, this time because it was stuck, as soon as it started to move a tiny bit, it was immediately loose. So it came loose straight away. I'm pretty happy with that. And so there's a new technique for removing broken cartridge cases. So what I'm going to do now is, just in case there was any of that super glue left, you know, on the chamber wall, I'll give the chamber a bit of a swab with some patches soaked in acetone, and then I'll just oil the whole barrel. All right, so here we are back again, and it's been done. That was pretty successful. I'm pretty happy with that, and it was simple too. Now the thing that struck me with that method is, if you were out in the bush, so you know, if you were out on a property or out shooting or at the range or wherever, you'd gone away and you were out shooting and you had a broken case, I mean, it's just disastrous. You're going to then just got to pack your rifle up and go home because, you know, you can't get the case out and you have to take it home to get it out. That method that I used, I mean, you're going to have, in this one anyway, this is a bit unusual I suppose because we only have the front of the case in the chamber. You're going to have some empty cases, and super glue is pretty easy to get. You know, super glue or cyanoacrylate, and of course it comes in lots of different names. Super glue, I think, was the original name. It was actually, I think, Loctite. Actually, Loctite Corporation actually invented it way back when, and they called it super glue. That was their brand name, but the patent's long since expired, and there's a whole heap of different sorts. So they're coming all sorts of names. The one that I used wasn't actually super glue; it was some other one. But I'm just using super glue as a generic term for that type of cyanoacrylate, you know, instant glue. It's widely seen, so if you're out on a property, the property owner is likely to have some at his house, or if there's a gas station, roadhouse nearby, they generally sell it in their, you know, automotive hardware section. So that should be pretty easy to find. And as far as, you know, I used that Brownell's Acroglass releasing compound to protect the case. You know, you could probably use anything. You could probably use something like shoe polish or some sort of wax, or even gun oil at a pinch. I think if you coat it in gun oil, the super glue is not going to stick to it. So, you know, that repair that I did, if I had a tube of super glue and I was out in the bush, I think it would have been successful. The only thing you wouldn't have is, you know, I put the case into the dye and squashed the neck down so that I could actually make it easily go into the chamber. But I mean, just putting it into the chamber and giving the bolt a bit of a bash with a, you know, even, you know, a bit of timber and a hammer behind that so you don't damage the bolt. But I think that would be enough to push an empty case, you know, up into the neck. Oops. Enough to create that, you know, you need that surface, you need it to go in, so you've got that surface for the glue to stick on. So I think that would, you know, I think you'd be able to do that in the field if you had to. And as far as cartridge with case head separation, I mean, if you look at the 303 British, for example, if you had, you know, that's a common one, you know, that you might be out in the bush, it might happen. You know, when you look in the chamber, you can actually see the back of the broken case. So you could probably just use a little twig or a match or a toothpick, you know, clean that inside, that bit of inside of the case, and then just put your super glue just, you know, in the first sort of 5 mils or something inside the case like that, and then, you know, clean your other case and then just jam it in with the bolt and leave it to harden. And the other thing too is, you know, I waited. Well, I was intending to wait 12 hours, but then I got busy in the morning and didn't get to do it, so it was the following night, so it was 24 hours. But according to the specs on cyanoacrylate glue, it actually gets its maximum hardness about 8 to 12 hours. So, but it does get pretty, as you know, if you use super glue, you know, after 10 minutes, it's pretty tough. So you could certainly, if you're out in the bush and you wanted to shoot, you could give it a go. You might find that it will stick enough just in 10 minutes to pull it out. And then if that doesn't work, you know, you sort of put some more in and give it another go and leave it overnight. You know, I stressed at the start, you want to make sure any method that you use, you're not going to damage your rifle. The main thing disaster would be with super glue would be, of course, if the case just got glued into the chamber and you just couldn't get it out or couldn't knock it out or whatever was glued into the chamber. But even that's not a disaster. I mean, you wouldn't be able to fix that in the field probably. But all you'd do is you'd come home, you'd buy a container of acetone, which is pretty cheap, and then probably use something like a piece of water pipe or something. You know, take it out of the stock, use a big water pipe or something, fill it up with acetone, and then just dip your whole, you know, action and chamber, the whole thing, just dip it in the acetone and leave it for a few hours, and it will dissolve all the super glue away, and then you'll be able to pull it apart. And of course you'll have to then probably pull your bolt apart and re-oil it and everything, but it's not disastrous. It's not going to cause permanent damage to your rifle. So it is a safe method, so that's a good thing, you know, compared to, as I said earlier, the methods where you're using hardened steel tools in the chamber. That makes me, unless you're using one of these properly designed cartridge extractor tools, which are safe, but using threaded tools or files or rasps, or trying to pry it out or anything like that, I think just don't even go there if you can help it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you've learnt something. It's something you can just keep in the back of your mind. I mean, you might not get a broken case for the next 5 years, but when you get a broken case, you'll go, hopefully it'll help you out. Anyway, that's about it for today. So until next time, thanks for watching.